Congressional Dollar for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I just want to thank all the members for coming in and providing testimony. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone who brought us thoughtful amendments relevant to this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Massey, did you have any questions for yourself?
I have no questions for myself on my amendment, but for the gentleman from Guam, I had some questions about the exemption to the Jones Act for your amendment. Would it just be for Guam, or would it be for other U.S. territories?
I'm sure it will be very helpful for the other U.S. territories as well.
But your particular amendment
Is for Guam.
just for Guam.
Right.
And would it allow a foreign flagged vessel to carry goods from Guam to the United States and back? Or is it these three-legged trips that you're talking about? Would it only apply to those?
Because right now, they go from Asia side to Los Angeles. They unload, re-put them on the U.S. flagship, then they come back our way. So that the total cost it basically doubles the product. And what we've invested into Guam for the national defense and the buildup in Guam, we're paying extra than we have to for all this billions of dollars that we're putting in from the NDAA. In addition, it would also support the people of Guam by bringing down the cost of goods as well. So if we can get that track where they don't have to go that far and they can just directly come to us, of course it would help. So we're asking for the exception that would really help with the defense of our nation and the help for our people of Guam.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Just a couple of questions for my friend from Utah, Mr. Owens. Your amendment is for 7 slots, additional slots for DCA, for Reagan, correct? And just as a reminder to make sure I heard you correctly, 1966 is when the perimeter rule, the so-called perimeter rule, was adopted, affecting DCA, affecting Reagan National Airport. Now, I think there's some like 800-ish flights that come in and out of Reagan, touchdowns, takes off every single day today. Some people are raising concerns about the traffic that might increase if you have 7 additional slots added. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I don't know if the gentleman's advised. You may not be. There certainly weren't 800 flights coming in and out of Reagan in 1966 or in 1985 when it was raised from, I think, about, I can't remember what the exact number was, but it was increased, the mileage was increased from about 600 miles in terms of the perimeter in 1966 to about 1,250 miles, again, arbitrarily selected by legislators in 85-ish, mid-'80s. But the traffic's gone up immensely in terms of the number of flights in and out of Reagan National Airport. Is that correct? And there are 10 cities that have exemptions currently from the 1,250-mile rule. Is that correct? I think Salt Lake City is one. Austin, Texas is one. I'm able to avail myself of the one direct flight that goes from Austin to Reagan. I think I'm just trying to clarify for the record for people. There's been a lot of debate about this. I mean, right now, the people who are opposed to this are predominantly those airlines who have, frankly, monopolies, right? United Airlines. American was opposed to your initial version of 28 slots. Now that it's down to 7, it's kind of a neutral, soft opposed. Southwest favors. There are others, depending on the markets. And I think that's telling. I think for the American people to understand this. What we're trying to do is free up competition. Trying to free up the ability of people to be able to fly directly to the national airport inside, right here at the nation's capital. And in my case, total parochial issue, 100%, I acknowledge, San Antonio, 7th largest city in the country. We do not have a direct flight from San Antonio to to DCA. Unless people are thinking this is personal, I will probably not take that flight very often. My home is much closer to the Austin airport where I have a direct flight. But the people of San Antonio, military city that have Joint Base San Antonio and have a lot of business with the Department of Defense, and in Washington, they can't get a direct flight to Reagan. And the reason is, and I assume the gentleman agrees, effectively an arbitrary rule set in place in 1966. And so I think what the gentleman has done is starting with 28, working to try to get to something reasonable, and he got it down to 13 or 14. Now today, I think the amendment that the gentleman's offering is 7 slots to free up competition in or out of the perimeter, to allow each airline essentially to be able to vie for a slot, in essence, to be able to free up competition and allow other cities and places around the country to get a direct flight to Reagan. Is that a fair summary?
It is, yes. And let me just say this also, the FAA has already found that there's a lot of unutilized slots that can be used. And I think it really comes down to one simple thing. This is the only airport that actually has federalized in terms of a parameter set by legislators. Every other airport is in the free market. And at the end of the day, think about what we're talking about here. Every other sector has a free market in place. So the price comes down, quality goes up, convenience, all that is part of everything we do every single day, other than those trying to fly to the nation's capital. I just can imagine millions of people, young children, high school kids, small business owners trying to have access to their legislators cannot afford to do so. So to me, this is as basic as it comes. I've actually heard someone make the comment that this is kind of a selfish thing for us, those members who want to fly in directly. And I've never thought that the free market was a selfish process for the consumer. We represent millions of people that are trying to get here. They cannot afford to write off their trip, cannot afford to just get on the flight and come because we have the government taking care of it. This is something that every American should have an opportunity to come to be educated, to address their representatives, and just to let the market flow. One other point there. It's also going to help Dulles. One thing about the free market, there's a tendency when it's a monopoly that the service is not as good as it could be because it's not competition. Everybody benefits, including Dulles, including all those, of course, are around Reagan. So I'm hoping that we can get past some of the fiction. There's a lot of fiction going on. This is a win-win across the board for everybody, and we don't lose out any routes that are presently in place for those that have small airports.
Yeah, the gentleman says, so no one is going to lose a flight under this plan, correctly? And it specifically contains language that will protect in-perimeter flights that currently exist, for better or worse, by the way. I might be able to make an argument, but right now it has language that specifically protects that, correct? Yes. And 7 slots would be less than 2% of the current slots at DCA, right? And so, and I just want to reiterate one last point, the point that and the reason I raised it, because people are going to no doubt write stories. Oh, you want your direct flight. Again, I might take a flight from here to San Antonio to make some event at some point. I can imagine a scenario where I will. But 99% of the flights I'm going to be taking are going to be right out of Austin. I've got the direct flight there. But for I think it's 159,000 odd veterans or something in the San Antonio area, for Joint Base San Antonio, for all of the businesses there, a city of 1.6 million people, San Antonio, Texas, is completely unable to have a direct flight to Ronald Reagan National Airport because of an arbitrary rule set up by this body. It is time for that to end, and I'm going to be pushing this very hard on the floor and going forward with whatever happens in the Senate. It's time for this to end. I'm kind of beyond the back and forth on this as being something that's a reasonable debate. The perimeter rule is archaic. If we want to have a debate about slots, let's have a debate about slots. But I'm not going to sit here and allow San Antonio and other cities to be restricted from their ability to be able to access an airport for an arbitrary reason and not a reasonable one. To the gentlelady from Georgia, I just want to thank the gentlelady from Georgia for offering the amendments that she's offered with respect to DEI and with respect to the other issues that she raises. I'm still not sure which ones will be yet. I'm not sure which ones are made in order relative to other ones for various rules. Those are critically important, I think. And as we saw last week on the NDAA, these are things that should not be at the front and center of a federal administration that's focus is supposed to be on aviation safety and not on promoting effectively social engineering. And I appreciate that the gentlelady offered those amendments and the other amendments for, specifically with respect to the vax mandates. I know there's one that's been made in order or that's being talked about or about ensuring that there's no mask requirements and other stuff, vax mandates for passengers. But the gentlelady's point about pilots who lost their ability to carry out their livelihoods because they dared to stand up and say, hey, wait a second, why are you doing this? And then the other issue that she raises with respect to EKGs and, questions about the impact on, what's going on there? Why are they changing the standards with respect to EKGs? And I would note, it's interesting that I've had some people complaining about lifting the pilot age 2 years, and we're talking about having the same EKG tests and stuff, yet the FAA is watering down the EKG standards, and we're trying to figure out why. So I appreciate the gentlelady's amendments. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair thanks, gentlemen. The gentlelady from Minnesota have any questions?
Would,
I mentioned, if I just, thank you, have a process point that I need to make. I mentioned the amendment to the Schools Not Shelters Act in the listing of disasters, that there was not one that included a freeze, which occurred in the state of Texas. It's not covered by a snowstorm. So I know that for process sake, just to let the committee know that there is an amendment from me. It's amendment number 19, and it has been submitted. And maybe the committee will be gracious enough to make that minor change in the list of disasters to add freeze to the Schools for Shelters Act of 2023. It has been submitted. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. The gentlelady from
Thank you.
Pennsylvania. Are there any other questions for this panel?